Howdy, strangers. Welcome to episode 3 of season 2 of Talking to Strangers. I am the Alchemystic, your host, but you can call me B. Today, I've got a very special guest from my past, my other lifetime as a professional wrestler. He was my super fan, and he was a fresh-faced little kid in the crowd back when I met him. But now he is a hypnotherapist and with his own practice, and he's doing wonderfully. My guest today is Grant Offenberger, aka Grant Heisenberger on Instagram, right?
I think I changed it recently to Instagrants_hypnohealer.
Oh, nice. Right on, man. Good for you. Yeah, it's really cool to see I remember you as just like this little kid in the crowd, right? Like, and you're my super fan, and you're always, yeah, you and your dad were always there with your Russian hats and your Yevgeny shirts. And it just always like warmed my heart whenever I would see you there because like I was a heel. So like I didn't have a lot of fans that were like cheering me on, you know. I'm the guy that you boo, boo, the dirty Russian. And man, you took it to another level. You actually made something that I cherish every time I see it, man. My Sasha Darevko action figure, man. Look at this thing. You went into like detail with the hair on the legs and the beard and the t-shirt, man. That's my Yevgeny t-shirt. I designed this t-shirt of my bear, my Russian bear. That was supposedly my training partner, and you made a replica of it and put it on it's just fucking awesome, dude. Like I trip out when I look at it. It's just like, man, somebody cared enough to put this much detail into a figure of me. It's like everything you like ever imagine or wish for as a pro wrestler to be able to impact somebody in that way. So you got a special place in my heart, brother. Because it's like the wrestler life's pretty grindy, and like those are the types of things that make it worth it, because we go through a lot of hell to entertain you guys, and to know that I made enough of an impact on this little kid in the crowd to actually make a figure of me. It's fucking awesome. So let's get on with the interview, brother. We haven't talked too much over the years. I've seen you here and there, and as you've grown. So I want to know, because we are pretty much strangers, even though you're such a big memory in my past. I want to know, what's your story, Grant?
My story, where do we start? So that's where we start, I guess. I was watching you every month at wrestling shows and following you around and putting on a little Russian hat, waving a flag and screaming for you until my throat gave out every time. And from there, I suppose I just started to grow up and I had to get a job and make money, and that wasn't very fun. You know, like restaurant jobs, that's not all that nice. I don't recommend them. And
No.
but I was always interested in influential figures and larger than life storytellers. Of course, wrestling, that's still a big part of my life to a degree, but also infomercials, politics, cults, all that kind of stuff. And so I would always, even though I had to start paying bills and be an adult, that stuff was still around and I was always very interested in it. And then I met my now wife, and she moved into my parents' house. Then we moved into some little back house that was basically made out of cardboard. I didn't know walls were supposed to be thicker than this, but these ones weren't. But we loved it. We made so many memories there. And in my constant researching of cults and things of that nature, one day I was like, let me check out this Tony Robbins guy and see if he's a cult. And I remember watching a video of his. I'm like, that guy's hypnotizing people. I don't know how, but I know he is. And so I Google Tony Robbins hypnosis and I find out about NLP and all these different things. And then I found out you can learn this stuff. You can learn what these people are doing. There's techniques to it and you can do it and help people. And so then that became like completely my life. And I got so absorbed in it and dug deeper and just wanted to learn everything about that became like my whole identity. And then I started helping people with it. I started to use this hypnotherapy to help people. get better at it. At first, I had no idea what I was in for. I was scared I wasn't going to be able to do anything good. So I was like, just pay whatever you think it's worth, because I didn't want to charge them money if I was doing terribly. And I would do things that I had no idea if I could help them with. I was like, let's see. I mean, worst case scenario, they don't get help and they don't pay me. But and that was surprising to see what I could help people with, and so that was a lot of fun. And to this day, I still use it to include my other interests. Like I love wrestling. And so I get to have a panel at Comic Con and WonderCon. And so I get to include wrestlers. So I had Sin Bodhi at my Comic Con panel. I was going to have Brian Kendrick on my panel, but pro wrestling, the show got canceled and stuff like that. So he didn't know if he could promote it, that kind of thing. So for WonderCon coming up, I'm having Joey Munoz, Joey Chaos, so he can promote Santino Brothers Wrestling. And so I get to have these wrestlers on my panel and I get to mix these different worlds. I have a guy from Guar, Techno Destructo on my panel, and I get to meet all these interesting people that I otherwise wouldn't have got to meet. And so it's really opened up a new world of my life. It's really interesting and I love it.
That's rad, man. I think you got me on a panel for Comic-Con one time. It was either you or your dad that got me on there.
Yeah, I
That
think
was
it was my dad.
Yeah, I was that's the only time I've ever been to Comic-Con. That's the only time. And I was a panelist. It was pretty cool because I didn't really achieve like this great fame in pro wrestling, but like I was there alongside Mr. Anderson, who's also Kennedy in WWE. And I completely forget what the actual topic was. It was something about superheroes in pro wrestling, like the crossover
Mhm.
of the storytelling of like the hero and stuff like that. How does wrestling kind of translate and kind of cross over to with like a superhero type of archetype? So it was I remember it being really fun, and I still have that the little badge from the Comic Con too. It was a cool
Nice.
experience. So it's really cool, man. You've gone from this like fresh faced little kid to actually an adult that's got a practice. And um, how do you go about getting into something like that, hypnotherapy? Is there like a certification
I
process or like a school or like what's that entail?
Yeah, so there's all sorts of different certification processes. Now in California, it's not as regulated, so it's harder to tell if you're going to get a good teaching or not unless you go to something more prestigious like the National Guild of Hypnotists or one of the more famous hypnotists. I've been lucky to be in contact with two of the most famous modern day hypnotists like David Snyder, Jason Moneta, their names, and they've been very good to me. They've been so nice to me. In fact, there's another thing that Comic Con has given me. I gave David Snyder, this very famous hypnotist teacher, some passes, and in return, he gave me free certification classes. So that was great too. But yeah, anyone can claim to be a hypnotist, but there's obviously better teachings than others if you're going through an organization like the ICBCH, NGH, different organizations like that, or if you have personal mentors that are very skilled. I started self-teaching, but I didn't see people yet because I was just kind of self-teaching myself. I didn't know if I was doing it right. And but the first actual class I took was like a 3-day class, and I don't use a single thing I learned from there because it wasn't that good of a class, but I didn't know at the time. I happened to write down a ton of notes, and so then I started to look up all the things that I had written down that I didn't understand or know, and that really helped. But that class was not the best. So there's definitely different qualities and levels to what you learn.
So, what are some of the techniques that you utilize, and like what are the some of the issues that you have with your client? Like the clients, I imagine it's one of the big things we talk about on this podcast and always have is mental health awareness and kind of breaking people out of depression and PTSD and the different things that go into that. Like, what are some of the issues that people come to you with?
Yeah, so I've seen people for so many different kinds of issues, from fear of flying to the stereotypical want to quit smoking to people that have been raped and they have the trauma from it, all sorts of different things and anything in between, anything you can think of, even meth addiction, all sorts of interesting things. And what I've noticed that most, not all, but most of the things happen to be are trauma. Most of the things are trauma related. Something bad happened, and they're stuck within the cycle of that negative emotion from the past. And once I learned that most of it is trauma, I focused my studies on how to help people with trauma. And it turns out that a lot of the time it's actually fairly easy because I mean, people go through trauma and it's a natural response. Something negative happens and your mind wants to avoid it again. But if you don't process it, then a lot of times people actually put themselves in similar situations over and over again until they get the learning processes. And there's simple techniques to extract these learning processes. You can't change your past, but what can you learn from it that you can protect yourself and create a better future for yourself? And there's some simple techniques that can take just a few minutes and they have profound results on people, which is really interesting.
So you talked about something that I've kind of been dealing with is my smoking habit. It's something that I've quit before, and then I revert back, and then I quit, and then revert back. And what would be some of the advice you would give me to kick my smoking habit?
Yeah, smoking's an interesting one. Smoking, I would say, is one of the harder ones that I work with clients. Interestingly enough, you would think it's one of the easiest because it's so stereotypical for hypnotherapy, and yet it's one of the most difficult ones because it brings you pleasure. It brings you some sort of control that you have this time to yourself, that you have this time to focus on your breathing, that it brings you something positive. And when a lot of people come in because they want to quit, a lot of times they want to quit because their wife wants them to quit, their children want them to quit. They want to do it for someone else, not for themselves. When doing it for yourself is the only way you're going to get it done. And the only way to get it done is through the two different forms of motivation. And that's through seeking pleasure and avoiding pain. And the biggest proponent is avoiding pain. That's what motivates people the most because it's just a survival aspect. You're going to want to avoid dying. You're going to want to avoid pain much more than you're going to want to pursue pleasure. They've done studies. There's a 4-to-1 ratio of how much pleasure it takes versus pain to create a neutral. You need four units of pleasure for every 1 unit of pain because pain is such a strong motivation. And so searching on, well, what is going to happen if I continue to smoke? Like actually looking at the most negative side of it. How much pain is this causing me? Actually focus on that pain because avoiding the pain is going to be your biggest motivator. So actually thinking this is actually going to happen. This is going to drain me financially to a degree. This is going to cause a million health side effects, and actually focusing on it, really playing it out in your mind and letting it be a reality, because all the pain you associate to the smoking will create that motivation to avoid it. When you associate the pain with the smoking, it becomes one and you'll want to avoid it. Now there's techniques we could do, simple classic NLP techniques like the swish pattern, where you imagine a negative habit and a positive habit, and you just swish them until your mind creates those connections. There's all sorts of different things we could do one-on-one, but for your own personal self is focusing on what pleasure it brings you that you can take with anything else. Well, it allows you time to yourself. It allows you to focus on your breathing. Well, you could do that without smoking. And then focus on what pain is it creating? What pain is it going to cause? And allowing that to be a motivator to avoid it.
That's good stuff, man. And my hardest thing with it is because I watched my aunt uh deteriorate and die from cancer because of lung cancer. So, and then my father was a smoker his whole life and died of a heart attack. So, I definitely have the pain motivator to get me out of it. The one thing that and you said, it brings you pleasure, and which it does, but it also, I feel at this point, because my brain chemicals are geared towards it, like one of the things, the hardest thing that I'm having a breakthrough with it on is like it makes me creative. Like in conversations, I'm on the phone, I'm going to smoke a cigarette, and it facilitates my conversation through my brain chemicals. And when I'm making art, like I'll sit down with a piece and I'll trace it out, or whatever the design is, and then I'm thinking how to color it. How do I want to color this thing? And so cigarette and a coffee, and then boom, it comes to me, right? Like as a writer too, if I'm writing something like a screenplay or a poem or whatever I'm writing, if I reach a rut or I reach a spot where I'm like, what do I want to do next? It's just that's the biggest thing. And then like there's other factors too. Like I feel like it's not so I may be sticking my foot in my mouth or looking like an idiot here, but I think that there's some kind of benefit to the ceremony of it. I really admire the Native American culture, and I feel like they had a ceremony with tobacco, and it was a very spiritual thing for them. Tobacco is one of the four sacred medicines of the shaman. So I think that there's some kind of benefit to it, and there's a reason why I'm drawn to it. There's a reason why it creates this effect within me where it stimulates my creativity, and I just think that for me personally, I don't want to lose that part of it, but I know that I use it as a crutch. I know I use it at times when I am in pain and I want to just release it or
Mhm.
there are certain triggers to it that if I could just undo those triggers and just use it in a more positive or ceremonial way, that would be how I want to. I would want to change from a habitual smoker who needs a cigarette every hour to somebody that can maybe take puff in the morning and a puff at night and be good with that. Because I feel like I said with the ceremonial stuff, like especially I'd smoke American spirits, which you look at the ingredients, it's tobacco and water. And then you're putting fire to it and using your breath to light it. It's the four elements. And I see it as I'm kind of on this alchemist path of becoming one with the elements and everything that entails. Like I feel like there's some kind of spiritual ceremonial benefit to it that I don't want to lose. So I'm on this little like back and forth where it's like I know in the back of my head it's telling me, "Hey dude, you need to get a hold of this." But there's also the other voice that says, "Yeah, but it's so good." So like like you said, man, I need to get to that point where I can associate the habit to the negative things that I've seen the result in my family members, people that were really close to me that were their lives were taken because of it. That's got to be the motivator, I think, right?
Yeah. And I mean, to use it from time to time for ceremonial reasons is not a bad thing. In fact, when I was first learning to help people with drinking, I was taught don't just have them go cold turkey with it. If they drink from time to time, that's not a problem. And the reason you do that is because if they happen to relapse and they have a drink, they then don't go, oh, it didn't work. I'm an alcoholic. And they create that as their identity. Don't give them a black and white, you're a non-drinker, you're an alcoholic. Allow there to be some wiggle room in the middle so the times they do drink it doesn't set everything back the way it was. And so I mean you certainly could use it for ceremonial reasons from time to time. It's just when you use it as a crutch because it seems like it's anchored to that creativity, where if you create that creativity, no one's creating that other than you, and so you can learn to create that without the cigarette as well. If you want to use it for ceremonial reasons, of course, go ahead. But you could create other anchors that create this creativity. Like I teach people mudra mapping. So you would do different mudras and you would intentionally create certain emotions, certain internal states while picking a mudra you want to do. So then you've anchored that touch to that internal state. And then when you do that touch later, just like Pavlov and the bell, you're creating that conditioned response that you create those feelings because you're so used to every time you do this specific touch, you feel this specific way. And yours happens to be smoking right now, but you can certainly change it to anything.
You mentioned the mudras, and I actually use mudras in my meditations. I do like chakra meditations in the morning, with the earth. I go out and walk on the earth, and then I visualize, the energy coming through me through my chakras. I hold the mudras because there's a mudra for each chakra, um, and um, and there's a chant. Each chakra has a mudra and a chant. There's Lam, Vam, Ram. Yam, Ham, Om, and then silence for the crown. But yeah, so how much spirituality is involved in the hypnotherapy process?
Other people incorporate it a lot. Like it's almost one hand in hand with certain people. With me, I would say it actually removed a great level of my spirituality. I was very much into spirituality, into the woo-woo kind of stuff. And then as I learned, and then at a certain point while I was learning it, I thought, this is entertaining. It's entertaining me, but I'm not quite sure how this is helping anything or helping me help anyone. And so then when I found the hypnosis, I go, this is exactly how I know I can help people. And I kind of stopped focusing on the spirituality so as much. But there is a degree to it if you want to get personal beliefs within it. I mean, I believe personally, I don't incorporate this in my practice because my personal beliefs are mine, but I believe we all have one collective unconscious. And so there's something nice about speaking with that person and speaking to their subconscious mind, their unconscious mind. And at a certain point, I become unconscious. I'm not aware of what I'm saying. And at a certain point, it's almost like a out of body experience. I pay attention and I'm aware of myself speaking, but I'm not aware of my control over it. And I go, wow, that's good what he just said, but he is me speaking to them. And it becomes almost blurry. Like you can notice all the details, but I guess I go peripheral with my vision and they just kind of become blurry in the middle of talking to them. It's just so in the moment that I feel like right there, that's a conversation with God. I feel like everyone is an aspect of the universe. And they create these stories of why they suffer, and these are such beautiful stories. Sometimes these are true to them, of course. This is the world that we live in, but these are stories of why the universe chose to suffer in this specific way. And so rather than being sad for them or being upset or anything like that, I just find their stories incredibly fascinating, incredibly beautiful, no matter how horrendous the story is. And then I feel my job is to help them find a better story, to find a story of pleasure, a story where they get to win. And so, to a degree, to me, I think that all of this is spiritual because I believe there's nothing more spiritual than being a human and being within your emotions and being fully present in what you are in this moment. Because I came to this realization just with myself. I mean, not everyone has to go be on board with what I think, but I realized that no matter what you believe, heaven or hell, reincarnation, nothing after death, no matter what you believe, you're only human for a short amount of time. Even if it's reincarnation, okay, you've been reincarnated 8,000 times, but the sun's going to eat the earth at some point, and that's a blink of an eye compared to infinity. So you're barely ever getting to be a human. And so the best thing to do is to be fully absorbed in the game of being a human. It's an experience to be had. Don't try to suppress the negative. There is no negative. Fully absorb yourself in all of it, but be in control because you know there's something deeper. And so to me, it's the most just being here is spiritual. But to others, I know they get more into it with the chakras, with all sorts of spirit guides and that kind of thing. I just don't personally have that within my practice.
Yeah, and I think it's the mind is a incredible thing, right? It can keep us trapped or it can set us free. It's like we're holding the keys to our own cage and we don't realize it a lot of the times. And so much of the traps I'm sure you see people caught in are just of their own design and they don't realize it and they don't know that they can break out of it. And the stories we tell ourselves, man, and so much. I talked about this in episode 2 with Stefan. So I think self-forgiveness is a big obstacle for a lot of people. A lot of people are stuck in their patterns of the past. They're stuck in their thoughts about what they did, and I think it's reinforced by dogma a lot of keeping you bogged down and guilty. Like guilt is a huge burden that a lot of people are carrying along with them when they don't need to. I think healing part of the healing journey is figuring it like going deep in and like finding those patterns and kind of just excavating them, get those patterns out of here. Because that our mind really is powerful enough to create our universe, create our own life. And when we're in these negative patterns, you're attracting what you're putting out. You know, that's how the law of attraction works, right? If you're stuck in a negative mindset, if you're Eeyore walking around with a fucking black cloud around you all the time, you know, people are going to be, one, they're going to be bummed out at your energy and be like, oh, this dude's a bummer, you know, and two, like you're going to attract those experiences to you. And I don't think people quite have broken through and understand that that's how it works, that our mind is creating reality. Our mind is creating our universe in front of us. We're all our own universe. We all have this little God particle in us that's experiencing life as our own universe, and we're the center of it. And we ultimately have the keys to create it. And um so what are some of the things that you find helps break through people of these patterns? Like how do you break through to somebody who's maybe stuck in like a Eeyore state of mind?
Yeah, I mean, so many people are in that state of mind. I actually have four techniques, and then there's four levels to know where they're at to break people through. I actually have a paper of it right here. Yeah, I call it the Guide to Authentic Living. Some of it is through things I've been taught, and some of it is just observing clients over time and realizing what works best for them. And yeah, some people feel this enormous amount of guilt, and some people feel shame, and some people feel insecure. And yet, if you're feeling anything that isn't the natural feelings that you felt as a child, just playing, I mean, children feel anger and get upset, but they don't hold resentment within themselves about themselves. So any of those thoughts are not your thoughts. These are something that your peers, your parents, anyone around you has told you. If you feel you're not good enough, if you feel anything other than you are just you, this is a psychic infection. This is brainwashing. This is mind control. This is an idea implanted into your mind that isn't your own original thought. And so the first thing I tell people to do is the three questions to freedom. Ask yourself with absolutely every thought that passes by. If you want to take some time to meditate on every thought that passes by, just ask yourself, whose thoughts are you thinking? Where did they come from? And are they serving you? Because chances are these aren't your thoughts. Chances are they came from fear. Chances are they came from a hierarchy of control. Chances are they came from anything that doesn't happen to serve you. And so when you identify what these thoughts are that aren't yours, that aren't serving you, you can identify where it is in the terms of a problem. Is this your own self-identity? Is this your environment? Is this your behaviors? Where does this problem lie? Because some people, their problem is their behaviors. They're doing these unconscious actions that are burning bridges, and they don't realize. They think that their problem is their environment. So these people will move from city to city, town to town, and they get themselves in the same trouble over and over again because they're treating it as an environmental issue when it's a behavioral issue. Some people, they will know that it's an identity issue. They'll get in a breakup after a long relationship and they'll get a dramatic haircut. Well, because they're trying to change their identity. They're trying to change their physical appearance because their old identity was with this partner. Now this is their new identity. They look different. But this isn't going to help long term because this is just a surface level. So we go into the levels of processing. Oftentimes people are in a state of fight, flight, or freeze. And that's within the brainstem. That's one of our oldest, the reptilian, the R complex is one of the oldest parts of us. And where you just act and react, you don't quite know what your emotions are. And so we figure out, well, what are you feeling? What is this emotion? That's the limbic system. That's a more evolved part. That's a newer part of the mind where you process these emotions. And then we figure out, when was the first time you felt these emotions, the initial sensitizing event? Take us back there. And what can you learn from that? What do you know now that you can take learning experiences from that situation so you can apply it to the future? And that's taking it to the prefrontal cortex that deals with problem solving, that deals with future pacing. Well, from there, we've cleared this negative loop. What do you want to do from here? What's your goal now? So then I have the hierarchy of human desires where the base level is pleasure. Most people are just looking for surface level pleasures, but that doesn't work long term. People figure out that after they get enough of the pleasure, they're bored of it and they end up suffering of it. So then people will look for control. Oftentimes they won't be able to control their internal state. So they'll look to control their external state as a result, and they'll try to control the people around them, their partner, their children, their house, and their belongings. But that doesn't really work either because you can't control everything. That's exhausting. And so you can only control your internal state. And at the peak of it, people are looking for entertainment. Everyone's looking for a good story to tell themselves. Maybe they belong to this collective identity. I am a Christian. I am a Buddhist. That's a cause to have. I am a child of God. Maybe they're a football player and that's their life. Everyone needs an identity that's attached to entertainment, and that's at the peak of it. So let's find a desire that gives you that drive, that entertainment. And time to time, you have some control. Time to time, there is pleasure. And from there, you just go through these four steps. And there's four levels to know if you've perfected it. There's unconscious incompetency, where you don't know what you don't know. Then there's conscious incompetency, where you don't know how to do it. You know how that there is something that needs to be done, but you don't know how to do it. Then there's conscious competency, where we've done this enough that you actually know what to do, but you have to focus on it. You backslide every time you're not focused on it. But when you're aware of it and you're focused to actually do this task, you're capable of it. And then mastering any skill is unconscious competency, where you don't even have to think about it and you can do it perfectly fine. You can text, you can eat food, you can talk to your friends, and you still drive home just fine. And you're not even aware of how you got there because you've perfected that skill. And so this applies to any skill. If you want to end that suffering, end that cycle, end that story that you're telling yourself that you're not good enough, absolutely anything, these four steps and these four levels get you there. And so I've developed that to help people, where not everyone can see me, not everyone gets to make an appointment. And so this is something they can do on their own. It takes a longer to do on your own, but they at least have the resources to help themselves.
That's interesting, man. I had a there's a Aldous Huxley video on YouTube about hypnosis. I don't know if you're familiar with it, but basically he's talking about societal hypnosis and how societies are controlled. But his assessment was like there's 20% of people are very susceptible to hypnotism, like you can get them like that, and then there's a 60% in the middle to varying degrees of susceptibility, and there's a 20% of people who just they cannot be hypnotized. So do you find that ratio in your clients? Are there some people that are just impossible nuts to crack that just will not succumb to it? And are there people, is that accurate, I guess, is my question. Is that an accurate assessment by Aldous Huxley?
Yes and no, double-sided. For something like stage hypnosis, or if you're using kind of an old school form of hypnosis, yes, because I think that applies to suggestibility, which is a good part of hypnosis, is suggestibility. That's almost entirely stage hypnosis. And yet what hypnosis truly is focused attention. So everyone can focus, absolutely everyone. So everyone's hypnotizable. It's just creating focus. Some people it's a little harder to. Some people you just need to confuse them and they focus because they're like, what's going on? But everyone's watched TV and got absorbed into a show and got emotional watching that show. That's hypnosis. But the suggestibility part, I'd say that's pretty spot on. There are some people that are much easier suggestible than other people. That's very true. So depending on what you look at hypnosis as, it technically is focused attention, but there's a lot of suggestion to it. You know, we want to suggest that you are a non-smoker, suggest all these positive things. And some people are harder to suggest things to, for sure. That's where something like neurolinguistic programming would come to play to help them with these therapeutic techniques when they're less suggestible.
So I do like frequency meditation. It's one of the things, one of the parts of my practices is using frequencies. And it puts you in certain brainwave states to make it more conducive to a meditative brainwave state. How close to like a meditative state is the hypnotic state? It's like pretty much the same brainwave, right? You want to get them in theta or something like that.
Yeah, they're very much sisters within each other. I'd say all meditation is hypnosis. Not all hypnosis is meditation, because you got like street hypnosis. You have shock inductions where you're about to shake someone's hand and then you grab their wrist and you put it to their face. They're just really confused and they're like, what's going on? Which isn't a meditative state at all, but it is hypnotic. But all meditation is hypnosis. All meditation is that focused attention. And so, yeah, they're definitely go hand in hand. Are you talking about like binaural frequencies and like 40 hertz, or what do you mean with that?
Have you ever heard of Project Gateway?
Yes, but I know nothing of it.
Okay, we're actually running out of time on on this part of the episode on part one. I'm stupid Zoom only gives me 40 minutes. Let's carry on part two on that. I'll get more into Project Gateway and some of the stuff that I'm doing and then I kind of want to get into this cult obsession that you have and kind of
Nice.
dig in deep to some cult
It gets
stuff
fun.
because I
They
got
just called me too, one
oh
of them.
this I got some rabbit holes, bro. Yeah, let's get into some of that stuff. So we're gonna wrap up
For
this
sure.
part one. I'm gonna go use the restroom and we'll be back with part two with Grant. And we are back, strangers. I'm here with my guest, Grant, Hypnohealer. What's the handle on Instagram?
Instagram, it's Instagrant. That's a pun. Underscore hypno healer.
There you go. If you guys are interested in Grant, very good first part here, and we left off talking about um, Project Gateway. So, Project Gateway, for you guys who don't know, was a project, CIA project. I think I want to say in the 80s. It might have been the late 70s. It was a to counter the Russian psych experiments. Right, the Russians were experiencing with psychic warfare, and with their spies, they were giving them basically having them listen to 4 to 8 hertz beats, and they found it gave them psychic powers and able to access different levels of consciousness. So the CIA started their own little program called Project Gateway, and they found allegedly, this is what they said, they stopped the project because it they couldn't find any applications to spying because all their agents that they had go through this program were having spiritual awakenings, and they really didn't want to be spies anymore. They wanted to go change the world and be spiritualists, and I'm sure they probably, the government does. They stop a project and they start a new one under a different name, and then they go deeper into the dirt. That was Project Gateway, and the Monroe Institute took the Gateway project and kind of tailored their own thing called the Gateway Experience that is available. I think it's available to the public. I got it from my friend, but it's something you basically it's helps you structure your meditative world in a lot of ways. And you put on like noise canceling headphones like this, and there's 7 folders with 6 different meditations in each folder, and it starts from like kindergarten and you graduate up to high school, I guess you could say, metaphorically. So it pretty much takes you step by step, and it's a voice guided meditation. And when I first started doing it, I was like, this feels a lot like hypnosis. Like if this is a hypnotic voice and the sounds, and then you definitely feel it your brainwave state switching. Like there's 5 different brainwave states, right? Alpha, beta, theta, gamma, delta, right?
Yeah,
Alpha, beta. I think that the highest state is theta, right?
yeah.
And that's
I recall. Correct.
yeah. So the Gateway project is geared towards getting you to the theta, which is like deep sleep, deep meditation, deep hypnosis. And this is something that I've kind of come across. I follow this guy on YouTube, John, what's his name? He's like a mystic that started this charity in Tanzania for disabled children, like mentally handicapped children, because like over there they don't really give a crap about these kids. They just kind of so he started a charity. But anyway, he's very spiritual, and one of the things that he was talking about was the correlation and the symbolism of these different brainwave states in like ancient texts. Like they in the ancient texts they referred to it as like, earth, water, fire, and air, right? The elements were actually referring to brainwave states. And I don't know if you're familiar with that at all, but there is a correlation between the ancient symbolism and the stuff that we now modernly have modern terms for it. Um, but it's an interesting little rabbit hole to look into is the symbolism of ancient cultures, because they were saying something to us, but there's like this lost in translation type with some of these symbols and and what these stories were really telling us. And it's an interesting little thing to look into.
Yeah, sounds interesting. I
Yeah,
mean, with these ancient cultures too, some of it is translation issues, and then some of it, a lot of it's in parables and metaphors, because that speaks better to your subconscious mind. But sometimes they get misconstrued, and the purpose is lost within these metaphors.
and then they become a dogma that murders anybody who doesn't follow them. Um,
That's right.
yeah, so it's a slippery little slope. Some of these ancient texts are, at least from my experience, I've been researching pretty much my whole adult life into little rabbit holes of trying to really figure out, put all the puzzle pieces together, like what is this experience, you know? And I feel like, you know, now with modern science and quantum physics and the understanding of the spiritual world, kind of how the mystery is all, it's all kind of intertwined, right? Like um there's a lot of things that have been lost in translation and misconstrued and like a lot of these story, you know, a lot of these Bible stories or ancient tales were all pointing to something very similar. And I think it's a lot like I refer to it like the Tower of Babel, right? The Tower of Babel is the confusion of the languages, where all the languages were basically all the knowledge got fractured with the confusion of the languages, right? If you take that as a literal event in human history, like, and I think a lot of these events, a lot of these stories are alluding to something in the past, right? Like it's alluding to something that happened that maybe they didn't quite have the language to explain, or they had different symbols or ways to explain it, and now we have a different scientific understanding of a lot of the same things. um Personally, I believe we're in a simulation. I don't know about you. I believe this is
Oh
some kind of
yeah, I buy into it.
is some kind of biological simulation. You look at the I was talking about this the structure of the universe and how it's very mathematical and it definitely seems like our technology is kind of mimicking the natural technology. Like everything's frequency and energy and vibration, and you know, and a lot of the technology is all frequency based. And um, what are your thoughts on frequencies? Like, do you utilize any frequencies or anything that type of that kind of stuff that I'm talking about, like in your hypnosis?
Back in the day, before I knew hypnosis per se, I was interested in spiritual stuff, and I was always gravitated towards the parts that dealt with the subconscious mind. So I thought binaural frequencies were interesting. I thought that and I lost a lot of the information that I once knew because I no longer applied it. But I even thought that, and I don't know the terminology, but like the pulse of the earth was quite interesting. They actually have generators that reproduce that pulse within the room. You plug it in, which is interesting because they did studies where they took people away from the pulse, and their health deteriorated. So there were all sorts of different things with frequencies, with vibrations that I thought were incredibly fascinating. And now, outside of my words and the client sitting next to me, what I do use, I'll use incense because your olfactory is such a strong sense, and it's actually linked to memory. They've done studies where people with essential oils at night, they actually improve their memory. They've shown that it helps with short-term memory, with Alzheimer's, that kind of thing. So I will have incense to help with memory because we need that memory. I'll have a certain song. I used to use any song with 60 beats per minute, so your heart rate could sync up with it because that's a resting heart rate. I now use a song called, I think it's Marconi Union or something like that, because they've actually done studies with that song, and it reduces anxiety by like 60% within 3 minutes. I believe it's simply just because it has a 60 beat per minute to it. So I'll use that music in the background for that purpose. Also use a little bit of white noise, lower than 40 decibels, because that helps with focus as well. So we got focus, we got memory, we got a relaxed state. So those are the tools that I'll use. I suppose technically the sounds are frequency. It's vibrations and waves of sound. Other than that, I don't quite use any of the binaural frequencies, the 40 hertz, that kind of stuff these days, because it's a process that is great for people to do themselves, but it's a slower process, whereas I need to do more rapid things because I only have them for like an hour and a half.
Yeah, the like I said, the stuff that I'm doing, it's like takes you from kindergarten to where you're doing it. You don't need a voice anymore to guide you. It's like you're just
Mm-hmm.
here you go, and you just go, and but it like brings you to that point. So and this process took, a couple of months, and so I can
Yeah.
see how the time crunch can make it so that certain things are more I guess practical to use in your time frame that you're dealing with. Um, so let's get into cults. What's your
All
uh
right.
what's your fascination with cults, and what draws you to them specifically, and what are your what's your most fascinating cult that you've come across?
All right, all right. So my interest in them probably stems from my general interest of larger than life figures like politics, like wrestling, that kind of stuff, and influence. Those all have influence. I loved infomercials, that kind of stuff, but that's hypnosis right there. So that was always an interest of mine. It also probably helped that my grandfather ran a wing of a commune called the Lafayette Morehouse, so which, for lack of a better word, was a nice cult. It wasn't an evil cult, but cult is cult. And so I've always been interested in around cults, and so I always like to look them up. I remember when I was a child seeing on the news, they would talk about like the anniversary of Jim Jones, the anniversary of Charles Manson. And I thought it was wild how people would just follow these guys. And so as I got older, I would just research different cults. There's actually one. And when I use cults, I'm not saying that this is a general bad thing. Some cults are great, some cults are good. And technically, what isn't a cult? But I'm also interested in these cults that go wrong, that they abuse their power. And there is actually a cult. Uh, Maybe 20 minutes from my house. I went to it. They actually have a documentary about this one called like My Daughter's in a Cult, something like that. And I went there and it was fairly interesting. The guy is in hiding because he's wanted, so you only got to see the guru in videos. And so we sit down and watch a video of him as he talks about some generic spiritual stuff. And then there's a book, and whatever page you open it to, that's your message. That's the message he has for you. But it's generic stuff, and we're supposed to create meaning out of things. That's what humans do best. And so you just pick this generic sentence and you prescribe a meaning to yourself. But I thought that was interesting too. Then there was food, and they told us to come on the weekend. We take our shirts off and wear like some weird pants, and we chant his name into this egg-shaped crystal for 3 days, and then we get to keep it and wrap it around our neck with a picture of him and have it forever. And I was pretty interested because that sounds like a cool experience, but I was busy that weekend. Lady gets all mad. She's like yelling at me, spits flying on my face. And then it happened to be COVID and the lockdown, so I couldn't have gone anyways. But then that got me interested in actually going to visit cults. And so this one lady named Janine, I went to hers. It was like in an old folks home, which was pretty fun. And we watched like the David Icke documentary and things like that. I actually met her outside of a David Icke premiere that got shut down that I was supposed to go to. And my latest one is that I've been enjoying visiting is the Scientologists. So they've been quite interesting to say the least. In fact,
That's a very powerful cult.
yeah, yeah, they were actually calling me as I was in this interview with you. Like, I don't answer the phone, but I told them like what happened with that was with hypnosis, there's neurolinguistic programming, which started in like the 70s, got popular in the 80s, which is a more advanced form of hypnosis. It's taken from 5 different therapies, and a big one is hypnotherapy. And they have a term called living at cause or living at effect. So you're either living that the world affects you, that you're living at effect and everything, you're a victim to the world around you, or that you live at cause, you cause your own reality. And so I thought that was a very interesting kind of metaphor with the two different ways you can live. And then it turns out that my grandfather used to teach that at the Lafayette Morehouse, that he learned from the leader of the Morehouse, which existed before NLP ever existed. So then I was like, where does this term come from? And I looked it up, and it came from Scientology. And it turns out the Lafayette Morehouse, they took some Scientology classes. So I went there and I explained, I like neurolinguistic programming. I know about you guys. I know the bad things. I know the good things, but I just want to know where these terms came from. And so they were fairly pleasant in telling me, like, looking up these different terms. And it turns out so much of neurolinguistic programming took it from Dianetics. They just don't want to say so because why would you? And so and then I went and I thought that was interesting and they were nice to me, but then I was still kind of scared because they are who they are. And so they kept calling me and I ignored the calls and they sent me letters and I ignored the letters. But then I saw on TikTok there were protesters out there and I was like, I want to go see them again. So I went to go check them out and they were nice to me. And but I told them, hey, I haven't answered your calls because I'm scared you're going to spam me and stuff. And I've just been real with them that like, hey, I'm just interested in this for like the hypnosis stuff. And I know the bad things and I know the good things. And they've been cool with it so far. So we'll see where it goes. But it's been interesting to study that cult thoroughly, both in an external, like judgmental perspective of I know what goes on behind the scenes, and also internally from the people that work there and what they think and what they believe and how they view it. Because I mean, the volunteers aren't viewing it as it is this mega cult. They're viewing it as they're literally trying to save lives. So it's interesting to see both perspectives and actually have like a middle viewpoint.
Scientology is fascinating. You got to watch your back, bro. Watch out. Like, I'm gonna keep an eye on you, bro, and make sure you're okay. Like, you never know. They're just probably the one, they probably want to recruit you, right? They're like,
Yeah,
oh, this
yeah,
is
that's it.
a hypnotherapist. We could really use this guy. And but
Mm-hmm.
also like they want to make sure you're not gonna Leah Remini them and
Yeah,
and do some kind of smear campaign against them or something. Which I'm sure
yeah.
they're very wary of.
I figure if I never smear them, we should be good because I'm not smearing them. I'm not gonna say any bad things about them. I think it's interesting the origins of modern day hypnosis that came from that. So I hope as long as I don't smear them, as in I put in a good word for them, they'll understand that I'm just curious about their teachings.
So what's your favorite cult? Like, actually, you know what? Let me rephrase, or let me go back a little bit. Is there an archetype for a cult member? Like, is there like a certain type of person or personality traits that kind of correlate across the follower group?
Yeah, I mean, it has to be someone that's broken, someone that doesn't have the collective identity. There's different levels of belief, and someone that's missing that collective identity or simply their own identity will typically need a cult to tell them who they are, either as a person or who they are within a tribe. And so that happens a lot, even in with the Scientologists, they do a personality test, and then that finds your your problem areas where you're lacking. So I'm like, oh, we can help with that. We can help with your area here and your area here. Luckily for me, I didn't have problem areas, so they couldn't really sell me on anything
Like,
other than
no, you're Stan Marsh, man. You're the next coming of L. Ron Hubbard. That's why they're after you. Your theta levels were off the charts, brother. So like, we
apparently.
gotta get
So,
this guy.
so any good cult is looking for those areas where you're broken because either they don't believe it and they're just trying to use people, or they honestly believe it and they just kind of get trapped in that power that they think they can help you, that they think they have the exact right answer. So they're looking for those broken people, and those people they to a degree need it because it gives them meaning in their otherwise chaotic, meaningless life. Any cult, that's a big thing that they're looking for.
I mean, everybody's looking for a meaning or a place to be, like a place to belong. Like, and I feel like I'm sure that it's these lost souls that are just like trying to find their group. Like, they've probably been you know, kicked out of groups or shunned, or they never belonged to a group, so they got to find that identity, and they find this ideology, you know. And I think the ideologies are pretty much a state of hypnosis, right? Being in any kind of
Hmm.
being conformed to any kind of ideology is somebody looking to belong, right? And it was just like what we kind
Hmm.
of saw with that last election, right? Or like even
Yeah.
or like COVID was this whole ideological subversion, this whole like mental, like psychological war that we were put under. We were put in isolation, we were put in masks, all these ritualistic things, right? You look at rituals,
Hmm.
right? There's a ritual of isolation, there's a ritual of identity, right? Of masking, the masking ritual of like losing your identity, and then you get a new identity. Oh, now you're a vaxxer, or you're an anti-vaxxer, or you know, it's just that, or you're a Trumper, or you're
Hmm.
far leftist, and it's just like all these ideologies are getting thrown around, and people are just trying to find some kind of semblance of normalcy in this COVID world. And what's really interesting to me, right? Let's kind of segue into COVID a little bit, because
Yeah.
nobody really wants to talk about it, but I'm like fascinated by the whole thing ever since it happened. Obviously, all the psychological stuff, because I was like, I had my finger on the pulse the whole time. Like, I'm one of those conspiracy theories guys. Like, I had a conspiracy theory podcast during COVID, and I talked to David Icke. You know, like
Nice.
I interviewed David Icke. I think we talked about that before. I have an interview out there in the
Yeah. Yeah.
on the ether somewhere where I talked to David Icke. You know, so when the COVID stuff happened, I knew there was some shady shit going on, wherever you want to believe about the actual virus and all this other stuff that came along with it. But you know, Rahm Emanuel famously said, "No crisis, let no crisis go to waste." So anytime there's any kind of crisis, whether it's organic or whether it's controlled, they're going to try to capitalize. And I knew right from the get-go, once the lockdowns happened, it was like, and it was this new world that we were kind of entering into, where like we'd had pandemics before, bird flu, swine flu, you know, SARS, but it never got to this level. So once it kicked to that next level, I was like, all right, let's see what happens from here. They're gonna do some fucking crazy shit, and they did.
Hmm.
And you know, so it's really interesting to me now. We're 4 years removed from the initial lockdowns. That it's like society. First of all, during that whole process, it felt like society was under a hypnotic spell, right? Especially if you were completely glued to the TV and you believed everything that the government and the CDC and the media was telling you. You know,
Hmm.
they're hypnotized 100%. But now that we're kind of in the stage where all those people that were hypnotized want to forget about it, right? Like
Hmm.
there's like no, people don't want to mention COVID. They don't even want to think of COVID. They have this trauma, I think they've never healed from, right? Like there's all this, we talked about healing and trauma. There's this deep psychological wound in humanity right now from COVID. And a lot of people just, they don't even want to talk about it. They don't want to fucking think
Hmm.
about, because they were a different person. They had a mask on and they had a new identity, right? This is all psychological shit, man. They fucking did it to us. Like that's literally the playbook of like psychological war. They isolated you, they stuck you in a fucking cage, they put a fucking mask on your face, and then they just indoctrinated you for 2.5 years, until the spell finally broke, thankfully. But
Hmm.
what are your thoughts on that whole thing? Not to
That
not to
was
give you too much of a broad thing, but like what are your COVID thoughts?
that was crazy. That was mass hypnosis at a lengthy level where people just didn't even think, even the things that they were telling us that were clearly not true. That I forgot who it was at the moment, but he said if everyone wore a mask for 2 weeks, this would be over. And everyone just bought into it and believed it. And then they started blaming the people not wearing masks. How is that possibly true? That's not true that if everyone wore a mask for 2 weeks, there would be no coronavirus. And yet that's what the government is telling you. There were curfews. We couldn't be outside after 9 because what COVID starts roaming the streets at 9 o'clock? That makes absolutely no sense. And yet politicians can have these parties, politicians can take pictures pictures at sports events with their masks off. The rules didn't apply to them. Celebrities are having parties, and yet every day there were helicopters flying overhead over my house, making sure that there weren't any parties going on. It was ridiculous. And it got to my family. I mean, they're watching the news every day. It's getting to the point where I'm having family members begging me every day to get the vaccine. They'll pay me $100 as if it was money that was the reason that I
That's the
didn't get the
incentive,
vaccine.
right?
Yeah.
That's, oh, here's $100. Here's a fucking cheeseburger and some French fries and a donut.
Right.
Oh my God. It's
Honestly.
fascinating, bro. It's like looking back at it, dude. It is fascinating. Like it was literally like human psychology class from me because I was just outside. I was just looking at it, just like holy shit, and fucking eating popcorn, right? Like not to like I was enjoying it because it was terrible,
Mhm.
right? But it was like I knew what was going on, and nobody wanted to fucking listen. Nobody wanted to fucking listen. I had a whole podcast where I was just pouring it out, like showing you, like this is all the lies. It's just so obvious. Like they created this huge fucking colossal boogeyman in COVID, and it got all these rules and oh, if you just do this, and it was just like it was like pushing the goalposts, dude. Like little by little.
Mhm.
Oh, if you just do this, if you just do it for a little bit longer. Oh, if you just get this vaccine. Oh, the vaccine doesn't work, but maybe this vaccine, and then yeah, you
Mhm.
get a booster, and then like, and I was just like, how long is this gonna go? How long until people just call bullshit? And fucking it took a while, dude. It took a long time. It took people like this is something that I like have so much admiration for people like Joe Rogan, Aaron Rodgers, Kyrie Irving, like even Nicki Minaj at some point, like these people that were just like, wait a minute, no. Like these people in the public eye that they face so much scrutiny. They got canceled. They got their fucking shit. Like I had my YouTube canceled because my podcast was just fucking walking all over the line, dude. I, you can still find Dead Rabbit Society on BitChute, and I think there's still episodes on Spotify. That's what it was called, Dead Rabbit Society. That was my
Mhm.
conspiracy podcast, but like, whew, we owe a huge debt of gratitude to these people that just pushed back. The Robert Monroes and the doctors like I forget his name. All the guys that went on Rogan, right? Like, they literally saved us, I think, because it woke enough people up to push back enough to push the tide back because people were just insane and they don't want to they don't that's why they don't I think that's a big reason why they don't want to acknowledge COVID at all because they just became a different person and just hated their family because they wouldn't get a vaccine, hated them because you wouldn't wear a mask, and it's just like ugh. Bro, there's gonna be some brilliant storytelling about that time when people are ready. I know I got some stuff cooking for my experience and the things I saw because I was seeing it all with clear 2020 vision. Like I saw it all, and yeah, thank God for those guys that didn't give a fuck and said, you know what, this is stupid. Like calling out the lies, like you said, dude. There's so many just blatant, and this is the government, bro. Like they blatantly lied to us for a long time, and the lab leak theory, they just denied it for fucking forever. When like they literally from like May of 2020, right? There's a Newsweek article about Fauci and his Fort Detrick, um basically the lab in Fort Detrick that was doing these experiments on coronavirus. They're talking about how it got banned by Obama, so they had to take it to Wuhan, and just detailing all this shit, bat to human transmission. Like it's literally this Newsweek article was like on point, and they must have been told by the overlords like no, because that shit got swept under the rug and nobody like I saved that shit. Like look at this shit. This motherfucker is the guy who's out there telling us what to do, and he's probably the motherfucker that made it. He made it in his little Fort Detrick lab and then took it over to Wuhan. Like it's deep, bro. It's fucking deep, and you got to be willing to really look and understand. And that's to me one of the silver linings of COVID is I think it snapped a lot of people out of this believe everything the government and the white coats tell you. because it's pretty obvious now to a lot of people that they're lying to us and they've been lying a long time. And anyway, I digress.
I mean, I think they got a little carried away. They realized how much they could get away with, and then at a certain point, they kind of crossed the line, and everyone's like, "Wait a minute," because there was a lot of hypnotic techniques. There was a lot of complex equivalents where this means this. If you don't quite trust the vaccine right now, then you're an anti-vaxxer Trumper who hates old people. And so there's a lot of complex equivalences. There was a lot of pacing and leading. 2 weeks to flatten the curve somehow turned into 2.5 years, and every small business goes out of business, and it's the largest wealth transfer, and there's massive amounts of money being printed because it was pacing and leading. Once you got used to this, okay, then we'll take it up a notch. Once you got that used to that, then we'll take it up a notch until you don't even recognize where you are anymore. And it was a lot of compliance tests. Well, if they're willing to do this, will they be willing to do this? If they're willing to do both of those, they'll most surely be willing to do this. And then once it got to a certain level, everyone was able to take a look and go, what are we doing? Well, are we going to take 80 vaccines and still get COVID? And now we're wearing 2 masks. Are we going to get told to wear 3? Are we going to just let every small business go out of business? And I think at a certain point, they just took it a little too far, and everyone began to question. And that's all it takes to lift a veil, is just people starting to question, which isn't a bad thing at all. To question things is great.
I mean, especially when there was so much just almost like double speak. It was
Mm-hmm.
just like there's all these different, oh, the CDC says this, and but then like look at the box on the mask says it doesn't prevent coronavirus, and then wait a minute, the flu disappeared? There's no flu? All of a sudden there's no flu anymore, and then it's like well, pneumonia's down a lot. It's just like all these things that had similar symptoms to COVID just suddenly started disappearing, and then COVID cases are. It was just so brother, it was a master class on societal manipulation and societal psychology, and I felt almost from the get-go on the lockdowns like this is some kind of test, right? And like a lot of people, there's a lot of sensationalists out there like talking about the vaccine. Oh, the vaccine's the mark of the beast, and then like it's it's just so much sensationalism in all facets of the opposition, right? Which made it harder to get through to the people who were pro vaccine and pro everything that was going on. Oh, you're a grandma killer. It was hard to get through to them because of the psychosis of the side that's against them. So now
Mm-hmm.
I felt like I was on this line between two psychotic points. Like it was just like no and no, like come here in the middle,
Right.
in the place of sanity, and let's like figure this out. Like come on, like, and it's just I still don't think we're fully back. I don't, obviously, like psychologically, there's a lot of trauma that's still carrying over from COVID, and I still feel like the ideological divide is very prevalent. I think maybe the people in the middle, are more consolidated and seeing that, wait a minute, these
Mm-hmm.
these people are fucking nuts, and these people are fucking nuts, and there's enough of us here that see that I think that, like I said, that's a silver lining, is it got a lot of people to kind of realize they're being psychologically manipulated, and to really like, maybe we need to look deeper at what the fuck these controlled people are doing, these people at the top, and just a little bit of healthy skepticism for the media has been healthy. Like the media has just been this hypnotic force for years in our lives. And I kind of, I woke up to all that shit in 9/11. Like I don't know if you're even born at that point, right? Like how old are you?
I'm
What
28.
do,
I think I was
do,
5 or 6.
do you remember pre 9/11 world, how wonderful it was? Like and they just completely, that was another event that just completely flipped society on its fucking head.
Mhm.
And I was 18 at the time that it happened, and I kind of got an iggy, like, to use a wrestling term, a little iggy from the universe, that something big was happening when I had this psychedelic trip on mushrooms, like a month before 9/11, and I got this like intuition from my trip that some like the voice or whatever it was that was communicating with me. It was like something big's coming. It's gonna change everything, and all your lives are gonna be different. Um, and I was like, huh? And and then like a month later, I see the towers, and it was literally like my intuition's like, this is what I was talking about. Like it was like I got an Iggy, so I was like, it caused me to really look at that event like critically. Like there's because I just it was like this intuition. Like I don't know if you've ever done psychedelics before, or if you're um keen to
Big
like because
advocate for mushrooms.
yeah, it's coming a long way in the mental health field. Like
Hmm.
microdosing is, which I
Hmm.
understand why. It's kind of like a reset button on your brain.
Yeah.
It really kind of resets it. Like for me and all my psychedelic trips that I've had, mostly with mushrooms, I did a little bit of acid, but mostly with mushrooms, I always came out of them, the trips with like a fresh perspective, like of where I was fucking up. I call it the
Hmm.
mirror, right? When you're on a psychedelic trip, at some point you go deep in your subconscious where it shows you a mirror like, hey, motherfucker, you're doing all this dumb shit that's fucking you up. And if you don't stop doing
Hmm.
it, you're gonna keep fucking up. And like it really is kind of like a spiritual experience in a lot of ways. And like you feel like you're getting like your Jiminy Cricket is that you've silenced comes out in a very loud way. And it is like, look at this mirror, dude. And so a
Hmm.
lot of people are just like, oh no, and gets in this dark tunnel. And I've had some pretty wild experiences with mushrooms, dude. Um, but I've always come out of it with like, all right, I gotta stop fucking up, dude. And yeah, bro, it's really fascinating. I've been on this journey now for 20 some odd years since 9/11 of where I'm just like, I believe nothing that's on the television. I believe nothing that the news tells me. I believe that the entire political system is a charade and a puppet show, And so I'm always just looking for the angles. And so I was well equipped for COVID, man. Well equipped. But it's still fascinating for me to look back at that time period and just shake my head like, wow, what a pivotal time in our history where it gave me a good insight into what they want to do to us though, the control grid and all that stuff. And we're actually running out of time again on part two, so we're gonna have to go to part three, buddy. So
Thanks. I'm
so
ready.
yeah, man, good stuff. We're gonna come back with part three. We'll get a little bit deeper with Instagram Heisenberger or Hypnohealer. Instagram. It's Instagram _ Hypnohealer
Yeah, yeah.
yeah, yeah. So we'll get back with part three. One. And we're back for part three with Instagram _ Hypnohealer on Instagram. Grant Offenberger, brother. We left off talking about COVID, and you said you wanted to go a little deeper. So let's go a little deeper into COVID.
Yeah, I mean, it was an interesting journey. And I mean, I didn't want to take a position, I wanted to keep an open mind. I wasn't pro this or anti that or anything like that. But it was a lot of people telling you how to live your life, which was concerning for me. And I know a lot of those people were looking out for the public's interest, and a lot of it was misinformation by the government, by people of power. They naturally would trust these people because they have the ultimate information. And whether they somehow just misinterpreted the information. They took guesses when they shouldn't have, but they did get a lot of wrong information. And it was interesting just to see the people around you and how they reacted because, to a degree, this is within them the whole time. You got to see the shadow aspects of a lot of people that are really close to you, which was interesting to see how they react in those hard times. And that's within everyone. And so sometimes we don't acknowledge that within ourselves and we see it within the world and we judge it, but it's within all of us. If you look at yourself during COVID, well, that's an aspect of you that you'll always have unless you address it and you transform it. And it was interesting to see how many people would turn on you. Like even my wife, they tried to force her to get the vaccine, and we weren't pro-vaccine or anti-vaccine. I've been vaccinated with everything else. I'm not anti-vaxxer at all, but I wanted to see if this worked, what it would do. It was a little concerning that they put a clause that you couldn't sue them if something went wrong. So then I was a little concerned. I wanted to see how it would affect people in the long term. So I wasn't ready to take it. I didn't think there was a need for me to take it because I was young and I was healthy. And there seemed to be no evidence that it would stop you from giving it to other people. So I wanted to buy my time. And they tried to force her to take it, and she said no. And they said, well, you can't work here if you don't. And she said, okay, and grabbed a cardboard box and packed her stuff and walked out, which was interesting that
Good
they
for
would
her.
act like that, right?
Good
They
for
then
her, man. Uh,
they then called her and had her come back and take weekly COVID tests instead.
of course. I mean, man, and like trying to get across to people, because like I said, I did a conspiracy podcast. I was trying to get the word out that hey, there's something fishy going on here. Um, is that the experimental nature and the fact that this was a new technology, a new way of doing vaccines, and that I don't think that that was really properly ever communicated. And anybody that tried to call attention to it, like, hey, dude, this is experimental. This isn't like approved by the FDA. They got a conditional approval that pending, tests, right? Pending like basically experimentation, and you were the experiment subject, and little did you know that you were the guinea pig in this massive public experiment of not only psychological but like medical. It was a medical experiment that they used, that they inflicted upon us. And it's just it's just a wow. Like it's interesting how they got everyone to just turn their logical brain off in the name of safety. And it was, it's alarming, right? And you said talked about the shadow. And I think that's why a lot of people don't want to look at COVID, because they don't want to go into that shadow that came out of them, right? And
Mhm.
like you said, the shadow's in all of us, and it's that's part of the psychedelic experience. Not to derail the COVID stuff, but the psychedelic experience is like you'd go deep into your shadow, and like if you can't get a handle on it, it will overtake you. And a lot of people got overtaken by their shadow, and it's uh, it's going to be fascinating to see going forward, like what happens, because they really put society on. It was already, the house of cards was already kind of teetering, right, economically, and just with the way they've printed money in the past 20 years, which is a whole other subject. You mentioned it, that how much they printed like 40% of all the money that's in
Mhm.
existence, and a lot of people don't understand economics, that how that's going to affect the overall money supply, which is another thing I was ringing the alarm bell about. It was like, hey man, they're printing all this money out of thin air. Like, you understand inflation, right? Like, and a lot of people don't. And so I had to explain it. I had to come up with this metaphor, right? I came up with this metaphor of like baseball cards, right? If you say, so you had 10 Mickey Mantle rookie baseball cards and they're worth a certain amount, right? And then all of a sudden you find a box of 100 of them somewhere in a storage unit. And all of a sudden now there's 110 Mickey Mantle baseball cards. That's going to devalue those 10 Mickey Mantle baseball cards a little bit, don't you think? Like now that there's
Mhm.
110, it's like it devalues, like scarcity drives value. And like if you print however many billions of dollars, trillions of dollars they printed during COVID, like that's obviously going to affect the price of everything. And we've seen it, like clockwork. Gas went up and food went up and everything went up. Rent, water, electricity, it all correlates. That's how the economic system works. And a lot of people unfortunately can't really grasp economics and what the money supply really is. It's a current of energy, first of all. But you print all this stuff out of thin air and you're going to devalue what already exists. And it was just elemental to anybody that has any kind of economic understanding. Um, but yeah, now we find ourselves in even more precarious position economically, where we have this housing market, we have all these,
Yeah.
not to be the doomsayer of the economy, but yeah, it's
Good.
all of the things take steps taken were by the government seemed to be the wrong ones. And it was like you start to wonder is they say Occam's razor is like don't attribute to malice what can be attributed to incompetence. But I would really wonder, is it really incompetence, or did they know all along that that was going to be some kind of society shaking event, especially given all the things. Like the interesting part was like the World Economic Forum, right?
Mhm.
They, I don't know if you pay, I'm sure you probably are tuned into that stuff, right? Like all the stuff
Mhm.
they were doing during COVID, like, and they kind of just, they released this like manifesto of this huge, like, data drop of what the future world is going to look like all of a sudden and how, and it was just like wait a minute, this is too convenient. Like it's like you had this and then I remember the World Economic Forum had this like spider web of information of like the medical how the medical system was going to work and all this like a control grid type shit. It was all like ready to go like within months, and it was just like this like I guess you could call it like quagmire of information that I was like, there's no way you did this within 3 months. This thing was planned. Like, I think that drove the conspiracy theorists even more of like, hey, look at this. And then there's Event 201. They just did a war game on
Mhm.
this stuff in November. And now all of a sudden in March, all the war game stuff's coming into play. It was about coronavirus. It's like, what's really going
Yeah.
on, government? And like, it was, yeah, bro, what a trip.
It was crazy. And to a degree I really fell into that stuff because I didn't want to take a side, and then yet when there was all this misinformation coming from who should be the experts in this field when there's suppression of other thoughts over social media, it kind of steered me to the way of thinking that this was planned. And to a degree, maybe it wasn't, and maybe it was. Don't attribute malice to what you can attribute to incompetency. I think to a degree, I want to attribute malice because if there's that much incompetency, that's scary. That's scary that we're
Right?
led
Like
by
what's
that
what's the
amount.
scarier scenario here, right? You're
Hmm.
either it's either malice, which is very disturbing, but the incompetence is almost more disturbing because it's like, who the fuck is running this place if you guys are so like fucked, and like so either way you slice it, like the confidence in the public machine is it's fairly shaky at this point because it's like I don't care if it's malice or it's incompetence or it's both. It's fucking disturbing, and like maybe we need to look at these people on this system that's being run and like maybe do it a little different or like get the fucking people in charge the fuck out of there or like does that even matter at this point? Like, uh,
That's
what
crazy.
what a
But I
tangled
got I
what a
got
tangled
really
web.
into I know. And then I got into the whole World Economic Forum thing. You'll own nothing and you'll be happy. And maybe they mean that in a good way. Maybe they mean like you don't have to worry about owning anything. You'll be covered because we'll have all this support structure. Maybe that's what they mean. And at least in that moment, that's not how I took it. I took it as in you'll own nothing and you'll be happy. And I
And
thought,
you'll
well, I
eat
don't
these
want to
you'll
own
eat these crickets. You'll eat these fucking
nothing. Yeah.
crickets. You won't eat meat anymore. You're gonna have cricket fucking chips and
Exactly. And so that terrified me. And I focused on, well, if everyone is focusing on losing at this moment, everyone is grabbing toilet paper and yelling at each other, and everyone is focused on losing. Someone has to focus on winning. And what win can I focus on? And I thought, well, I don't want to own nothing. I need to own some property. And so I bought a house in that time at like record low interest rates, but it was so hard because someone out there is buying all the houses in cash. How could I compete with cash? So every house I tried to buy, it was bought up in cash and I couldn't get any of them. I ended up slightly befriending the owner of this current house that I now own and telling him the struggle that I had and told him I'd pay 20,000 more than what you're being offered in cash, and he had pity on me and he sold it to me even though it kind of was a bad deal for him because he could have bought this other house. But that's been amazing because you can't afford to rent anymore. I don't know how
Mm.
anyone is affording to rent. I certainly couldn't. My mortgage is cheaper than modern rent, and I have a quarter acre of land. It's not an apartment. I have an extra room that people like. I get to let people stay here when they need a place. Various family members, various friends. I don't know if you know the wrestler Jor-El. He stays here all the time, and it's great to have a place for people to feel comfortable. And so there's one thing to take from these tragedies, because there's going to be more tragedies. It's not like this was the only tragedy that'll ever happen. Focus on what you can win and focus on, well, what was my shadow like before? And how can I learn from this to make it be better this next time? Because it's not like you can just hide from it forever. There's always going to be struggles and challenges. So how are you going to act the next time?
Dude, like, not to brag or anything, but the COVID was probably my most prosperous years. Like because once I knew what was going on, I kind of just like, all right, I'm gonna just, I literally, okay, so I'll tell you the story, right? So how I won during COVID. So I was doing Uber at the time, and the first couple of months of COVID, I was doing Uber because people were tipping exorbitantly, and I was making really good money just delivering people's food. Like that's what I was doing, Uber Eats and delivering people's food, and I was making money hand over fist, and just to deliver people's food. It was, and I got to make my own schedule. It was like perfect for everything I was doing. And then a buddy of mine also was doing Uber, and he told me a couple months in, like, hey, you can apply for unemployment, right, as an independent contractor. And I was like, oh, okay, let's try this. And they're giving out unemployment to anybody at that point. And so of course I got it. And then they gave me all my back unemployment. And it was like, boom, $12,000 into my bank account. Sweet. So I was like really into like crypto, looking into crypto and stuff at the time. Crypto was gonna boom. And so I took this money and I put a lot of it into Bitcoin. And Bitcoin at the time was at 18,000, right? And then Bitcoin shot up to 66,000 in the time that I had held my holdings in the Bitcoin. So I like tripled my money. I already had like they just here's this money. Then I tripled it with Bitcoin. And I was just living off of that. That's how I started the podcast initially. Is like I had all this money and I had this idea to do this podcast and like do something positive with it and build something. So that's what I did. And then that sustained me for a while. Like Bitcoin was up and down, but I was like just using my unemployment money and I would add on to it and I was just kept making money. It was just like this cash register that I just this ATM machine. I just kept making more and more money off of Bitcoin. It was just insane how much I ended up making. I don't even know. Like the government comes after me, is like, "Hey, wait a minute, we heard you about your podcast. You made how much money did you make? How much you make on Bitcoin? I don't fucking know. I spent it all going to Vegas.
Watch out.
I can
The
be,
IRS has guns now.
yeah, yeah. Uh, Good luck, man. Look at my bank history, and you can't catch me. You'll never catch me, IRS. But yeah, dude. And then probably the biggest like score of my life, right? I'll tell you this quick little story. Um, so Ronda Rousey trained with me and Brian Kendrick initially for her WWE run. And she when she wanted to do her second run after her pregnancy, she Brian was still working with WWE at the time and didn't have the time, so she hit me up. It's like, hey, do you want to train me for my comeback? And it's like, of course, of course. And so the next couple of months I was going out to her place, helping her, give her some couple new moves, and was just training her. And I knew ahead of time she was going to win the Rumble, right? That was how it was going to go down. And
Mhm.
I found a betting site that offered 25 to 1 on her winning that Rumble. And I bet $400 on her to win the Rumble and cashed out 10 grand.
Nice.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
great.
Yeah. I was so I just on a winning streak, dude. I was just winning, 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 winning. And it was awesome. So like I was one of the ones that was like, all right, society's losing, but I'm gonna win out of this shit. And when I did, so
Hmm.
it wasn't such a like I don't have any trauma from COVID at all because like I saw through the illusion the whole time and I didn't fall into the bullshit. I didn't really lose any friends out of it. You know, um there was no like you're an anti-vaxxing, no masker, grandma killer. Like I really didn't have a lot of those type of people in my life anyway. And even the ones who were kind of more on that side, they weren't the people who were not understanding. Like it was so yeah, whatever, man. COVID, fuck it.
Yeah.
I prospered.
I think when you come from a place of genuineness, that most people can sense it. I mean, at least when you're in that state of the whole COVID panic, and you're not taking a side of the psychosis conspiracy theorist or the oh my gosh, everything the government says is exactly true, and you're just authentic within your own thoughts. That people can sense it, and so they don't really hold grudges or lash out. At least that's true with me. Even when I go explore these cults and I go visit them, I'm genuine and I'm authentic. Like I'm not going to join your organization, but I think cults are interesting and I tell them and they're cool with me because I don't have one side or the other. And so I think when you're actual genuine with your thoughts and your feelings, it's harder for people to really take it out on you.
I mean, I generally am like that in with everything, right? Like I don't fall into an ideological box, and I never really have. I've always kind of been like I don't like going with the crowd. I never did. That's why I became a pro wrestler because like I didn't want to do a 9 to 5, and I had this Cinderella like this big like Disneyland vision of my life of like being a pro wrestler and living the dream, and so I chased that, even though I very like academically capable. I probably could have gone finished a 4 year college and ended up in a white like a button up dress shirt at a desk job. I think that's probably what my mom wanted. She definitely didn't want me to be a pro wrestler. Um, but that's I kind of just march the beat of my own drum. I don't fall into any camps. I don't fall for any ideological illusions, I guess you could say. So I think that genuine authenticity of like I'm just me. Like I'm not with you and I'm not with you. And don't fucking label me. Like that's one of the things I kind of adopted from like being a fan of like Alan Watts and stuff is kind of the futility of labels in general, of how it's like the label is like the thing you cling to, like you cling to this label, but like, is that really you? No, it's not. Like, you're not a label.
Mm-hmm.
You're just a human being. Like anything beyond that is kind of superfluous and doesn't really serve you, and ultimately will steer you away from authenticity. It'll steer you away from an authentic version of yourself, that which is really you, the real authentic version of you, if you fall into these ideological camps of leftist or right wing or Christian or like you said Buddhist. The labels, I think, are what drag people down a lot and get them off track. Is like they have to identify with this group, they have to identify with something, even like their nationality. Oh, my family's from Germany or some shit like that, and
Mm-hmm.
they you it's just all forms of I feel like almost like a prison, like to be to like I'm this or I'm that. I'm or you identify with your job or identify or with even with like sports fandom or something like that. It's all kind of like I'm a big Dodger fan, right? Like I love the Dodgers. I've always loved the Dodgers, but like the Dodger fans are like excessively like the Dodger fan stereotype, right? Stabbing people in the parking lot and getting in fights with Giant fans, and like it's toxic, right? It gets toxic more you try to create a group identity, and George Carlin talked about that, right? Like I love people like when it's just me and them. Like it's an individual basis. Like people are beautiful. You see God in their eyes, but like once you get two and three and four together and you get into groupthink and then now everyone's got to conform and it just steals that identity, that authentic self from you. And I think a lot of people are kind of trapped in that, you know?
Yeah. They don't have a strong identity and they don't have that strong collective identity. And so then they feel they have to conform. And that's a survival mechanism. If you didn't conform within a group, then you would be kicked out of that group and you'd have to fend for yourself. This is just something we've brought up through generation and generation, how to survive, but we don't necessarily need that anymore. We can evolve past that because we don't have to survive within tribes. And the world can be more connected than ever through social media. It's a tool that we can use for good. If you're kicked out of the tribe around you, there are certainly other tribes. There are people that think like you, not 100% just like you, because everyone's an individual. But there's no longer that need to conform into your local tribe. But people still get trapped into that because that's the way it's been for so long.
It's just so ingrained in our past, right? Tribalism. Like
Mm-hmm.
you needed that tribe to survive. Like nobody can go out. I mean, you can. Obviously, there are people like Bear Grylls and stuff that can go out and just survive on their own in the wilderness. And but we do need community. We do need fellowship. It just for our own psychological benefit, right? Like it's really I feel detrimental to be a long-term hermit, for instance. You know, like I've gone through this period of kind of hermit mode in the past year of this like spiritual journey that I've kind of been on, but it was necessary for my growth. I had to heal. I had to confront my shadows. I had to really just kind of find that authentic self that I'd lost. And I attribute that to when I stopped wrestling, right? That was my identity. That was like something I'd pour my heart and my soul into. And I kind of felt when I stopped wrestling, when I stopped being Sasha Darevko, I kind of lost a lot of myself, and I kind of went on this spiral of like, who the fuck am I? Like, where do I fit in life? You know, I had put so much into this one dream, all these eggs in this one fucking basket, and then I kind of had to walk away from it just because it was just this time in my life where I've kind of gone through these periods, like, and I've found this in my journey of spiritual, you know, practice and awakening of finding my patterns. Like, I've had these patterns in my life where I get close to a carrot and then something comes and like knocks me off. Like, for example, I worked for Medieval Times when I was 18, and I trained for a year to be a knight, and I was all set to debut as a knight. I was coming up on my debut, and it's something I'd poured everything into. I fucking love that job so much. And right before I was able to debut as a knight, I had this crazy incident happen with a horse where I was riding by on my horse, warming up this my knight's horse because that's what you have to do as a knight in training. You have to be the squire in the show. I don't know if you've ever seen the show, but
Mm-hmm.
I'm warming up my knight's horse before it goes out, and I got too close to this other horse, and it reached out and grabbed my arm with its mouth, bit me, pulled me off my horse, and I ended up out of the incident. I was able to get it off of me. There's a couple of, it was like all these people rushed over and got this horse off of me, but I ended up having to go to the clinic and to get checked out for it to see if I needed a tetanus shot. And they always tested you for drugs when you had to go to the clinic. Anytime you got hurt in the show, they um they had to test you, and I was pothead and I tested dirty and I lost that job. Like literally when I was right at the finish line, or about to be that night that I got a tattoo for it too. I got a night tattoo, you know, and yeah, just taken from me. And it's just I've had these patterns, and wrestling was another one. You know, I was like I was just wrestled on SmackDown, in like a squash match, and I felt like I was really getting somewhere with like championship wrestling. I was wrestling Peter Avalon for the title, and I was getting, you know, a lot of I was getting a lot of momentum. I was selling a lot of merchandise, and I was like, oh, this wrestling thing might fucking work out. You know, it's working with Brian Kendrick, who had connections, and I was going somewhere. And then like 2 weeks after my SmackDown match, I get dropped on my head and compressed my spine, and I went through this whole like healing process of this neck injury. I never went to the doctor because I'm a dumb wrestler, so I don't know exactly what happened to my neck, but it was bad for like 4 months. And in that process of healing, that was when I decided I can't do this anymore. I just had my big, I just figured like I had this big mountaintop moment where I got to be on TV and wrestle in front of millions. It was a dream of mine to be in a WWE ring, and I achieved it. And then I get hurt, so I saw it as a sign like, okay, I got to give this up, you know. But in doing that, it was a huge part of my identity, and I've been on this journey for the last 7, 8 years where I had to do a lot of healing, specifically in the past year, just looking at my patterns and undoing all my shadow, and really confronting it, but also embracing it. Like I feel like a lot of people are like want to get rid of their shadow because thinking they can, and it's egoic. Like you can't get rid of your shadow. Like it's a part of you. It's a part of your consciousness. Like you have to confront it. It's a part of finding that inner child, that's hidden within that shadow, that's scared in a cage in the shadow, and telling them it's okay, bringing them out and healing from the things that the patterns and the all the traumas. And it's a process, man. It takes a long time, especially when you're like me, where I've like had all this unhealed trauma from decades of this type of shit, like the stuff I'm telling you, these traumas of losing things. Loss is a huge thing, and abandonment wounds, and it's a deep ocean, man, that this mind and this body and this spirit, like it's a deep ocean that a lot of people get lost in. And I've certainly feel like I've come out the other side of it, of like, but it's one of the reasons why I'm so adamant about getting back to this podcast, because I feel like having been through my experiences and healing from it, and really coming to this place where I'm 41, but I feel like I'm in great shape. I'm making this artwork that's just pouring out of me as I could develop this new skill, and just doing stuff in the ring that I've never been able to do before. And I feel like I've come to this place of like my full potential, my highest self, my authenticity. It's like, and I think I can help other people do it too because of my experience. So anyway,
Yeah, I
that
mean, that's great. What would you say it would be? Because here's just an example for you. Probably the biggest life-changing thing was finding Alan Watts, his books and his lectures. That completely changed my viewpoint of reality, because before that I was quite neurotic and anxious, and after that I've taken control of my life, and everything changed from that point on. I would say that's a good check mark of where things took a turn. Is there something that really took a turn within your life, something that you can pinpoint? Things got different from here.
Uh, I kind of went into it in episode one. Kind of how
Mm-hmm.
what kind of catalyzed my spiritual awakening of where I'm at now. Like it was just this, but I've been on this journey for a while. Like I said, the wrestling
Mm-hmm.
losing wrestling was a huge like wake up
Mm-hmm.
call of like, hey, bro, you put all the eggs in this one like really kind of dumb basket. Not to talk shit about pro wrestling. I love it. It's always
Mm-hmm.
going to be a part of my life. And but like it was not a very intelligent thing for an intelligent man to put his eggs in, right? Like I have a lot of things
Mm-hmm.
going for me. There's a lot of other things I could have done better. But it caused me to really look at myself and what do I offer this world, right? So I found writing. I've always been a writer, somewhat of a writer, writing poetry and stories and this and that. And losing wrestling caused me to say, okay, what else can I do? What else? This is all I've ever really wanted to do. And if I'm not going to do this, I got to do something else. And I found a story about York from the Lewis and Clark expedition. He was the Clark's slave on the expedition, and his story like kind of like grabbed me, and I was like, why isn't this? I'd never heard of this guy. I didn't know there was a slave on the expedition, and there's all these things about him that are very interesting. So I really dove into that story and like got deep into it and read a bunch of books about the expedition and really kind of developed my own narrative about him. And I wrote a screenplay. And so that was something that I had already written one screenplay before, but it was like my buddy's idea, and it was just something I did for fun. But like when I got into this, it kind of clicked in my head, like, hey, wait, I can do this. I can write screenplays. I can write books. Like I can do this. So it was like that was a big thing. And then I just had like I talked about this podcast and how last episode in episode 2. If you guys want to know this whole story, like you can watch that episode. This very traumatic thing happened with this podcast. Is another thing that got ripped away from me. Right, I was doing this podcast and this tragic event happened with my co-host, and it just set me to where I'm like, I got to put this thing aside for a while, and I'm just now getting back to it. But all these events kind of there was an event that happened in my life about a year ago. It was just a traumatic thing of loss of a friendship that was kind of the last straw, right? Where it was just like all this trauma, all this loss, and it just was like this knockout punch where it was like the last straw of like there down he goes. And that was where I kind of had to just regroup and get myself back together. And luckily I had found meditation before this. And really meditation is what has been the change in my life. Like that's the thing that's changed my life probably more than almost anything else was finally breaking through in meditation because for a long time I couldn't meditate. Um, I just couldn't stop my brain enough. So my brain's always looking for things, just trying to soak up information and analyze things, and I just didn't have the proper mindset to break through to kind of set the mind aside and put the I guess force field around the thoughts to where they're not germinating. And so meditation was probably the key in me turning it around and really starting to heal, really getting deep into my subconscious mind and finding those patterns and just kind of figuring myself out. It was and I urge everybody, like if you guys can't meditate, go to the YouTube 21 day Deepak Chopra meditation. uh that 21-day meditation really kind of changed the game for me, and now I've just kind of taken the ball and ran with it. Got the Project Gateway stuff that we talked about earlier that has really helped even more kick it up to another notch. So I would say, to answer your question, just finding meditation was really the game changer for me, and finding time to give to myself, to fill my own cup, because I've always been kind of a people pleaser, right? Like that's why I gravitated towards this pro wrestling thing, because it was like you're in front of the crowd and you're the star and you get to make everybody happy. And that kind of fed into that people pleasing. And I'm a twin. I have a twin brother. And one of the things in the journey of the twin is like you're kind of like competing with your twin, or at least you feel like you are when you're young, for your parents' attention. And that's a pattern I've kind of identified in myself, is like it stems from that childhood, right? You got to go deep into yourself, into your inner child, and find these patterns. Where did they start? And the people pleasing really started at a really young age, because it's like you're competing with this other person to get your parents' attention. Not that my parents were inattentive, but it's just one of those things like that people don't understand about being a twin is like if you're a single, an only child, you're getting all the doting of the attention. Like when there's two of you and your parents aren't ready for it, and my parents weren't really ready for it. And who is? You think you're having one kid, and all of a sudden, oh no, there's two, and good luck. And like so, navigating all of that is like really, if I had advice for anybody, is like get into meditation, and if you're having problems mentally, like just go deep into your childhood, because that's where a lot of this stuff is rooted, and you have to heal that inner child. You have to find it and grab it by the hand and say, I love you. And it's okay. And everything's going to be okay. And that's where it starts, man. That's where you gotta get to the roots. And it's scary. And it's hard to look at the shadow. It's hard to go deep into yourself, because it's the thing we've been avoiding. right? We avoid the mirror. Like even when you're brushing your teeth in the morning, do you look at yourself in the mirror? Do you really look in your own eyes and really see the humanity in yourself? Do you look in your own eyes and say and tell yourself that you love yourself? Like it's very powerful, and it's very, very powerful to do and to really recognize your own humanity, and that this meat shell that we're in this unbelievable experience of life, right? It's powerful to really break that because we don't want to acknowledge these things, you know? So that's a long-winded answer to your question, but uh that's where I'm at, man. I'm in this deep ocean and I'm just swimming in it and I fucking love it. And um it's like clarity. Once you reach this state of clarity, after you've dealt with the shadows and you've healed, you come to this place of acceptance. And you know, you talked about Alan Watts. Alan Watts absolutely changed my life. Absolutely changed my life. That's another thing I would suggest to people is find Alan Watts lectures on YouTube. And I would, for a long time when I was really depressed and I lost wrestling, Alan Watts got me out of a deep depression of just, um, it was almost like a hypnotic thing. Like his voice is just so, it's a beautiful like frequency that he was on, you know, and just you could feel the wisdom just dripping from his voice. And I used to go to sleep to his lectures, and that really kind of changed the game for me. So, fuck, we're almost out of time again. Do you want to do one more, or do you want to wrap it up?
We can do one more if you'd like.
Let's do another one, man. This is going great. Let's we'll have more with Grant in part 4 of this episode 3. We shall be right back. And we are back for part 4 with Grant. Now, we've been talking about a lot of heavy stuff, psychological warfare and healing our inner child. And let's end it on a high note. Let's get a little lighter in how we met. You were my super fan when I was pro wrestling as the Russian bad guy, Sasha Darevko. So, what first drew you to wrestling? And I know you said you like the larger than life characters. And what was your favorite part about Sasha Darevko?
Yeah, so wrestling was always a part of my life. My father was a wrestling fan. Some of my earliest memories are of wrestling and wrestling related things around the house, wrestling action figures at the house, wrestling playing on TV. It's always been there. Didn't mean I had to like it, but I did like it because it was so interesting. How could you not like it when you're fully absorbed into it? Like I think the only people that don't like it just don't get it. But when you grow up with it, then you get it. And
It's perfect for kids, right? Like yeah, you got
mhm.
this this muscly like superhero figure in a colorful costume, and he's fights for the good of people.
Right.
It's perfect for a kid and a hero, like a hero if you're looking for a hero figure, you know.
Hmm. I mean, it's superheroes brought to life for kids, and then it's performance art, it's theater, it's acrobats, it's so many different forms of performance art all rolled into one. And then one day I went to a little comic convention with my father because he very much likes comics as well, and I enjoyed going to these conventions. And they had wrestling there, like a little independent show. It was Mach 1 wrestling, which used to take place in Anaheim. And I thought it was so interesting. I knew about AWS, another little promotion around the area, but I had never seen it. But I had seen this Mach 1 wrestling at this comic convention, and I was amazed. It was so interesting. It was a different feel than watching the big show on television. This was much more intimate. It was a little more sloppy, but that's what made it so fun. It wasn't that clean, polished performance. It was right in your face, and it was so interesting. I was hooked from that point with this local independent scene. And then there were shows always all around happening every week at an affordable price. I mean, I was a kid, so I wasn't paying for it anyways, but
Yeah.
and it was fascinating. We'd go like all the time to the little Mach 1 wrestling shows because they were like an hour and it was $6 or something like that. And then I found Battleground Pro Wrestling and all sorts of different promotions. And I saw you there for the first time at Battleground Pro Wrestling. And then I happened to find a YouTube video where you're telling the story of your bear Yevgeny. And that was the greatest thing because you were so into it. Like, how did you not buy into this story? And yet it was so over the top, so silly that how could you not love this guy? This is the greatest character. And so then it was fun to cheer you, and then everyone's booing, and then we're the only ones cheering, and that's fun. And then you take it up a notch, and my
Yeah.
father got us the hats, and we got a big old flag.
I love it,
One
man.
thing
Just
led
a
to another.
couple of contrarians there cheering the bad guy. Um, yeah, Sasha Darevko was the time of my life in a lot of ways, and I just randomly fell into that character. I didn't it wasn't something that I sat down and was like, all right, I'm gonna be a Russian. It was a certain set of circumstances. I had been I'll go and I'll do a little story time for you how I became Sasha Darevko. Um so I trained originally back in like the early 2000s, and I was a big fan of like Canadian wrestlers like Bret Hart and Chris Benoit and Owen Hart and like all these Canadian wrestlers. So I was like, I wanted to learn all their moves. So my trainer gave me this Canadian character, and that was what I was for a while. And then I left wrestling and kind of pursued some other stuff for a while. And I came back to wrestling after like 6 years away from it, just randomly through happenstance, meeting my friend who was my wrestling buddy that I trained with, and he was running his own show, and he's like, "Oh, come wrestle." Saw him at the gym just randomly, and it's like okay, and they gave me this character. It was like the unknown soldier, right? Like it was supposed to be the battleground pro wrestling mascot in a lot of ways. He's a soldier, and he's a for America. And God, I hope my tag partner doesn't see this. But so I was doing this masked character. It was like this camouflage mask, right? And it wasn't fit for me. It was formed for someone else's head. Didn't have like ties like a traditional lucha mask. It was just a slip-on camouflage mask, and I wore this army fatigues and stuff, and this max didn't fit me. Like it would like move around on my head, right? And I was wrestling the Russian Wolf Alexis Darevko, and that was my big feud when I came back to wrestling. I was the American versus the Russian, that classic tale, and he's a little stiff in the ring. I have to admit, and he would tell you that himself. He was pretty stiff, and I had a couple matches with him that went pretty good. But every time after the match, I would just be sore as fuck because he laid it into me, man. He had this NorCal stiff as fuck style. Like that's the big thing up in NorCal is stiff as fuck. And they lay it in thick, and it's different than the SoCal style. It's interesting how the styles are different in different regions in pro wrestling. It's such a I like that you called it a performance art too. That because it really is, and I'll get into that a little bit more. But I I had this blow off match with him, or like kind of like it was a big like gimmick match, like falls count anywhere, right? And he gave me this one forearm shot that like turned the mask, like I couldn't see out of it. It was like literally the eyeballs were over here, and then he like threw me into the post, and I took the post like I couldn't see to protect myself, right? To put my hand up or anything. I just literally boom took this post and it split my eye. I still have a little scar from it. Split my eye open. And after this match, I was just beat to fuck. And I'm like, I gotta get out of this character. Like, and I'm not a big pro America guy anyway. Like I told you about the 9/11 stuff, right? You know, it's a big conspiracy theorist guy, being this rah American guy, and just never like it really didn't fit me. And I'm looking, and this is before I started growing a beard for Sasha, but like before I found Sasha Darevko, I never had a beard like in my whole life. Like I was always clean shaven. And after this match in particular, I had like a 5 o'clock shadow, so I had a little bit of a beard. And I was looking in the mirror, and I was like, I kind of look like him. I kind of look like Alexis Darevko. I was like, what if I pitched this brothers tag team. I'm a Russian, like I could be a Russian. I'm hairy, right? I get this all this hair. Actually, you can't see it because I shaved my chest, but I'm super hairy. As you could see in the figure, you put the hair all over the legs and shit. I was like, I kind of look like Alexis Darevko. I could pass as a Russian. Let me pitch this idea. I got to get out of this stupid America character. And that's literally how Sasha Darevko was born. I just literally wanted to get out of this dumb, rah American character that I had been given. And it kind of just fit like a glove. And talking about societal psychology, I was playing off of the old Cold War era. That's what that whole character is, right? It's just
Mhm.
tribalism at its finest, playing on those nationalist vibes of like Russia versus United States, Rocky Four, you know, Ivan Drago versus Rocky. Like it's so ingrained in our conditioning, in our American nationalism and conditioning that Russia is the enemy, So it was just easy. It was like super easy to get over as a heel, as that character, and I just it just flowed, like the whole Yevgeny thing, man. I just like randomly came up with that stupid idea to be like, oh, I have a bear and I train with him. I fucking love those promos, man. Like it's like looking back at that is like I said, the time of my life, man. I met some of my most cherished friends, and it's just a lot of good times, dude, with those old battleground shows, our little karaoke parties after. Um, a lot of good memories, dude. And seeing you guys at the show every time, and I always knew I had two fans at least. And it was fun, dude. It was really fun. And so that's the story of the birth of Sasha Darevko. It's just this random character that I just took and ran with, and I felt like I was pretty fucking good at it, man. A lot of people just can't let Sasha go. Like I want to start wrestling again as a different character. Kind of been building this character slowly on my social media, and it's really like geared into like what I'm into now, like who I am
Mhm.
now. Like I'm such a different person than I was back then, and people just want me to be Sasha still, and I feel like Sasha had a good run, but it's just
Mhm.
you get to a point, and taking it back to the performance art, like you're an artist. Like people like shit on wrestling because they don't understand it, like you said. Um, there's so many different facets that go into pro wrestling. Like you have to be your own businessman, you're running your own business. You have to understand and learn business. You have to understand societal psychology. How am I going to get the people to react? You have to be an actor. You have to be physically in shape. You have to um like if you're working on television, you have to understand television production, how to gear your match towards certain cameras at certain times, and you need to write your own promos. So it's just so much that goes into it. You have to choreograph your fight choreographer. Like there's so many boxes that pro wrestling ticks, and so much I learned from the art of pro wrestling. And artistically, I just fell into this kind of creative rut with the character where I felt like I was leaning on that whole aspect I talked about, that whole Russia versus the United States. It kind of got stale to me as an artist. And now I'm kind of in this place where I want to do something a little more fantastic artistically that's more expresses who I am as an artist. And it's hard when you've made that. I made a fucking pretty strong mark with that character, obviously, because people still won't let him go. Um, and you could still see those promos. Still a YouTube page for Sasha Darevko. If you guys want to go back and see that Yevgeny promo, you can. It's still out there. Um, just look up Sasha. I mean, let me see what it is. It's still out there, dude. Sasha the Great Darevko YouTube channel. It's still out there if you guys want to go check out my Yevgeny promo that affected Grant so greatly. Uh, I appreciate you, man. Like you have no idea how rewarding it is as an artist, as a performer, to be able to affect somebody on a level where like you were compelled to make me a figure. Like that still warms my heart. I'm looking at this thing right now, and it's bringing back this just rush of emotion of like I actually did something good. I was good at something, really, really good at it, and enough for this little fresh-faced child to be compelled to fucking make me a figure that I'm going to keep forever. I can always look back at this figure now and remember all these memories. It's just this tome, this symbol of like who I was. It's really cool. It's really cool for me. Um, and I'm glad I've gotten to sit down with you and just really dive into stuff and see who the man that you've become, which is a very impressive thing. Like you've really grown up into this awesome person that I really vibe with, which is funny. It's funny the people we attract into our lives. Like we kind of attract our tribe and our people that vibe with us. And I'm really happy that you came on this podcast today because you have a lot of knowledge that I think is very beneficial at a time where mental health awareness and mental health treatment has never been more important, especially an alternative type of therapy like a hypnotherapy as opposed to medication. Which is something I kind of wanted to touch on with you before we wrap this thing up. Like, what do you feel for somebody who's maybe on these type of meds or like what would be your suggestion or how do you feel about the way that mental health is handled in today's world?
Yeah, so I've thought about it before, and sometimes it's easy to pass it off as maybe people don't want to do the work. This is the easy way out to take medication. And sometimes it's easy to pass it off like that. But there are some people that they really need the medication. There are some people that really need it. And so I look at it like Ozempic. They actually have different names for it now. But Ozempic or any of those products, where some people definitely need that medication. Other people take it because it's an easy, good way to lose weight in the short term and it's an easy fix. And other people take it because they don't know you can lose the weight in productive ways on your own. So I think some people rely on the medication. One, so there's a group that definitely need it. Two, there's a group that it's just an easy way to not have to focus on the fact that you're not living your authentic life because these problems are your subconscious mind screaming at you that this isn't the right way to go, and it's an easy way to quiet that mind. But there's some people who don't understand and they don't realize that there are ways that they can take control of their life. And if they knew and if they got started, then they would realize that there was no point to taking the medication. So I think there's three groups. I think it's a tool, and yet I think it's an overutilized tool that we can start to show people other productive ways where they're actually in control. They don't need medication all the time to silence that voice. They're in control because it is their voice. And so I think it's a double-edged sword, just like anything. A tool's only as good as you use it and what you use it for.
Yeah, and in our day and age, there's everyone's always looking for a quick fix, like you said, with like weight loss or mental health, or there's always just like, how do I do the shortcut version? Because I don't have the time or the patience or the energy to put into the hard way. So let's find the shortcut. You know,
Mm,
I feel like a lot of these things do become a crutch for the system as well, right? The system's like, we got this overwhelming mental health problem in this society. How do we fix it? Medicate them. It's just a
mm,
simple, like they don't need to go through put the money into programs or anything to really like snap people out of it. They're just like, here's the pill, like the old
mm,
you ever read that Aldous Huxley book, Brave New World? Where it's like the whole
mm,
the whole society is just on medication, right? That's how they keep
mm,
people in line, keep them in their class, keep them like going to their everyday shit. And it's just like, here's a bunch of meds and you have to
mm,
take them. Like it's like mandatory that you take these meds. And I think there's a Christian Bale movie where it's very similar. Like the society is this a top-down control grid where it's like they're keeping people in line by just getting them to suppress their emotions with drugs and here take this, don't be a problem to us. But I think like you said, there's definitely people that absolutely need these. Absolutely. And but there's also the lazy people that want to take the shortcut, and then there's the people that don't know that there all are alternatives. And I just look at like the mass shooting culture that's kind of developed the past 25 years, 30 years in our society, and like this correlation where a lot of these a good percentage of them are on these meds or were on these meds at some point, or like these meds play a part in altering brain chemistry. And once you take it away, and this is something I highlighted because I had, I talked about my co-host in this tragic event that happened, because he had a PTSD just blackout, like didn't he stop taking his meds and then just blacked out and did this horrible thing. And um so I think we need to be careful on the medication part. Like yes, with the people that need them need to get them, but there also needs to be more resources, right? More resources and more
Mhm.
acceptance of alternative therapies like your own. Because a lot of people might think, oh, hypnotherapy's quackery or whatever the fuck. And because they just write it off because that's what maybe like the medical profession doesn't support what you do, or the medical profession kind of sneers at it, kind of like Hollywood sneers at pro wrestling. You know what I mean? Like, like that's not real entertainment. That's not real medicine. Like, um, I think it's like these um these structures in society that are dictating norms, right? We'll look at something like hypnotherapy as like, but like in actuality, you're actually helping people. Like you're breaking through to people, and however you fucking feel about it, professionally, if you're a doctor and you think it's like, why don't you just take this drug? Like, is that is that better, you think, Mr. Doctor? Like, is it better to just throw a pill at somebody and be like, all right, work's done here? Like, no, we're complex beings, right? There are no quick fixes to this life. There's no quick fix to fixing your mind and healing. There's no quick fix. You have to do the work. You have to like really pour yourself into the self-love. Like that's what most people are missing. And I talked about this in episode 2, is like self-forgiveness and self-love. Like this is the barrier for a lot of these people, I think, they have mental health problems, is like they don't forgive themselves. They get stuck in ruts. They don't love themselves. They fucking hate themselves in a lot of ways, unfortunately. And there just isn't that guiding light to bring them out of that shadow, to bring them out of that darkness. It's just, here's a pill, dude. Fucking suck it up. Like it's backwards. And I'm very happy for people like yourself who are exploring these alternative methods of fixing the mind, because the mind is this very complex thing and there is no just easy way out, and there needs to be more resources into things like what you do, um and more take it seriously, and have it be more of, hey, maybe you should try this in the medical field rather than just medication. It's I don't think medication is the ultimate fix for anything really. Right? Like, yeah,
Right.
you look at any kind of medication on, it's these ads and they always list the side effects. And it's like a lot of these medications, and I'm looking at like my grandparents, right? They have this whole pill schedule, this little pill calendar where there's popping all these pills, and it's like it probably started with one pill, and then that pill might have helped whatever that was, but then it started this other thing that led to this other
Mm.
pill, which leads to another pill, which leads to another pill. And it's like big pharma is cashing in on all these pills that create more problems, which create more solutions for them to give out and make more money off of. You know what I'm saying? It's just like slippery
Mhm.
slope of our medical health field that I think COVID shined a great light on how that whole system works and how it's all profit driven, and the solutions are always more pharmaceuticals when there's a lot of holistic things and practical non-medicated related things that we can do, and there's solutions out there.
Yeah, I mean, you have so much power within yourself alone. You weren't born wrong. I mean, most people are healthy and most people can help themselves with being stuck within their shadow. It's just showing them how, because not everyone knows how to. But a lot of it is accepting your own strength, accepting your own power, and not everyone is comfortable with that, because when you accept that strength, when you accept that power, then the responsibility of your suffering ends up going on your own shoulders. That's yours to fix, and not everyone wants that, because that can become a burden. A lot of times it is easier, not necessarily consciously. I think most people aren't conscious of it, but to choose to blame the world for your own suffering is oftentimes a lot easier than
Ding ding ding
yourself.
ding 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 ding. Yeah, man, that's a big problem too, is accountability, right? Like we've been conditioned to play the victim, right? Victimhood currency has never been more valuable in today's world of like, let's blame everything else. It's it's the patriarchy and it's the um there's a lot of that victimhood that is ingrained in a lot of the ideology, right? The ideologies are getting you to this guy, this other ideology is the problem, or this structure is the problem, or it's like, it's like it starts with you, right? Like you want to change the world, you got to change yourself. And if you're not willing to change yourself, then you're going to be in these cycles of continual, you're going to keep failing the same tests because the universe is giving you tests to see if you're ready for that next step. And a lot of people get stuck in the accountability step of like, I need to take a hard look at myself, which is really what I've been going through in the past years, like taking that hard, tough look within and seeing what I need to fix. Because if these problems keep happening, it's the common thread is me. And if I'm not willing to look within and see what my own problems are and really address that and like seriously and they say when you're pointing the finger, there's three pointing back at you, and that's a step that a lot of people are not willing to take. They would rather take the way out of, I'm a victim. Everything that happens to me is just the world's against me, and that was a big problem I had for a long time. Was like thinking that the world was against me, with all these things that kept getting ripped out of my grasp of like I'm cursed, the world's against me, and like it's just this cycle that you're swirling the toilet, man. And it really takes it's a huge step to look in the mirror and be like, it's time to make that change. And then change is what I think most people fear the most, which is what has us in this, basically this, the way that society is now, right? Is just not being able to take accountability for our own shit and gravitating towards groupthink and thinking that that's the way out is by attaching to something else, instead of, you know, it's me. What do I need to do? And change is scary, dude. Like, and that's kind of why we've conformed to this machine-like world, is that it's consistent, right? It's just consistent. The 9 to 5 gives you that consistent paycheck, that hamster wheel that you're never going to get out of the wheel, but at least you got enough to feed yourself and pay your rent and keep going. And it's consistent. The machine is consistent, but I think as we're getting along this line of this AI control stuff and giving away our power to technology, which is a whole other rabbit hole, but like we're going to be faced with a choice of like accountability or giving away our power. And unfortunately, a lot of people are willing to give away their power because they don't want to take accountability and for their own life and be like, you know what, it's I need to do something. People get comfortable in their comfort zone and they don't evolve. And I think that's the big thing is like we need to, if we want to progress as a society and as individuals, we need to be willing to evolve because staying in the same place ain't getting us nowhere.
Yeah, I mean, that's true. And when you stay in the same place, it's going to become boring eventually. You're going to suffer by staying in the same place anywhere with anything. If you do the same thing over and over again, it becomes boring. You become depressed about it. It's just an endless cycle. Like people need progression. You need steps. You need to constantly advance and evolve. Comfort ends up becoming uncomfortable eventually. And so the problem is that apparently you have to suffer so much that it's no longer comfortable and you have to make the change. People reach that certain threshold, but everyone has a different threshold. You get what you tolerate, and certain people are willing to tolerate a lot more suffering than others, but eventually without changing, you're going to suffer.
Yeah, it's just like you said earlier about pleasure, right? Like if you seek pleasure enough, it's not going to satisfy you anymore. That dopamine hit from your brain gets less and less as you get more desensitized to pleasure, and you need more extravagant things. And then, that's you see this a lot with like sexual addictions or anything like of that sort, right? Or any type of addiction, really. Like if you like cocaine a lot, like chances are one bump isn't going to do you after like a 6 month bender. One bump ain't going to do it. You're going to need like four or five or six to get you, and you're always chasing this high, and it's like pleasure eventually becomes pain when you
Mhm.
overload on it, when you overdose on it, and then that's usually, I think, the point where most addicts are like, okay, I need to make the change. Like you said, it's like when the pleasure becomes pain and you get that discomfort instead of that pleasure, then it's like, well, what the fuck am I doing? And I'm hoping that as a whole, humanity, which I have a lot of faith that something that the positivity towards the future, that we have had enough of the pain. And I feel like we're in a tremendous time of shift and awareness, and we can get to a place where, like, we're as a community, we can be there for each other. We can also be comfortable with people being their authentic self. We can bring that out of people, where we're living in this authentic society where we're not so tendency we don't have the tendency so much towards groupthink, where it's encouraged to really heal yourself and take accountability and all those things, man. I think collectively as a society we've had enough pain, and it's time for a change. And hopefully through all the things we've talked about, COVID and all the bullshit and all the this things that have been pushed in our face of what this machine world really offers us, I have faith that enough of us will choose the authenticity over the synthetic. So anyway, brother, it's getting late. We are coming to the end of this little portion, and I think it's a good place to wrap up. And I'm really grateful that you reached out and wanted to be a part of this, because it's been a real pleasure picking your brain and getting it from your perspective, which is what this podcast is all about. Is just talking to people in different walks of life at different places in their life, and just somebody like you who in a podcast that we like to deal with mental health, has an alternative to the norm, and and to kind of just take the mask off of what people might think about hypnotherapy, because a lot of people, when you talk about hypnotherapy, might have a certain image in their head of what it is. Guy with a watch, you know what I mean? But it's like it's so much deeper than that, and it does offer a lot of help for people who maybe aren't looking to take a pill, and want to take the accountability and take the steps to do what they need to do to heal, which is ultimately what I'm trying to do with this podcast. Is it's just heal, just heal, man. It's okay. It's gonna be okay. Um, so I appreciate you, brother.
I appreciate you having me on. It's been great. I've thoroughly enjoyed this.
Yeah, man. And I would love to do recurring episodes and just check back in and maybe go in deeper on other stuff that maybe we didn't have time for. And I just want
Yeah.
to build a community, like really just a community of people. You've already you already know me to a certain degree, you know, but like even if like you're out here watching this podcast right now and you're a complete stranger, you never met me in your life, don't be afraid to reach out to me. I'm looking for anybody. And it's just you don't have to be a an expert in a field. You don't got to be have some great glorious life. Um I just want to reach people and build a community where we can just get together and talk about stuff like this, and there's no judgment. There's just understanding, and understanding that we are all, and at the core we are all the same. We're all part of the same consciousness, and we can build relationships and communities and heal and say no to pain and yes to healing. So I appreciate your brother. I'll be in touch. And is there anything you want to plug before we go?
Couple. I suppose the only thing is, anyone that's interested in anything regarding what I do, they could go to my website, grantmepeace.com. That's where I have uh, case studies, medical studies, all the different things it helps with, podcasts I've been on, my social media. So that's how they can stay in touch. They can follow me on social media through that website. Grant Me Peace is the one place where you can find everything about me. So if anyone has any questions or anything like that, they can find me there.
Awesome. And I'll put all that down in the description, guys, of the video. Grant, text me all the relevant stuff that you want me to put in there. I'll put it all in the description. You guys can reach out to Grant, find out more about his practice and what he does. Quick plug for me before we go. My wardrobe provider is Alchemystic Apparel, which is mine as well. This is my artwork. This right here is called Mystic Pyramid. It is a pointillism piece that I did with toothpicks. I took paint and made, you guys like pointillism, look up Seurat. He's a famous pointillist painter, but I used toothpicks and made dots with the paint. And it was for my mom's Christmas present. But that I made it into a shirt. You can find that as well as Talking to Strangers shirts on alchemisticapparel.com. Those are available right now for you. So yeah, guys, thanks so much. Everything, my relevant contacts on Instagram, TikTok, and etc. will also be down in the description. So you guys like, follow, subscribe, follow me on all my social media, follow Grant on his social media, reach out to him if you're interested. And that's it. And Grant, the great thing about talking to strangers is that now that we're done, we are no longer strangers.
Wow.
Deep, deep stuff.
I guess I could never be back on then.
Uh, we'll have you back on, brother. All right, man. Love you, bro. Thank you so much for doing this.
Thank
And
you.
I'll have the episode up within a couple of days. I'll keep you in the loop on that. So
Yeah,
thank
no
you very
problem.
much, guys. This has been Talking to Strangers episode 3, and that is a wrap.